Good morning and welcome. I am going to flip screens here and welcome you into the Unitarian congregation of Guelph. We are a shared ministry congregation with a mix of staff and volunteers that lead, co-create, and enliven our beloved community. Each member of community is essential, vital, a collaborator, a co-creator. Thank you for being here with us this morning, for joining us. Your presence matters, and it's deeply appreciated. There's a gift and value in each act of service, each smile, each moment of eye contact, connection, challenging and growth-promoting conversation, and in the act of being heard. We see the diversity in the ways that we hold and share community and celebrate this. I will place our chalice lighting words into the chat and invite you to join me this morning. We light this chalice with awareness and gratitude of our interconnectedness. We acknowledge that we are in the treaty lands of the Mississaugas of New Credit First Nation of the Anishinaabe peoples. During our region's rich Indigenous history, these lands have been home to the Chinootan people or Attawandaran, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Métis. We express gratitude for the sharing of these lands. We also acknowledge the tragic history between First People and newcomers. We strive to be accountable by acknowledging this history and cultivating respect in our relationship with Indigenous people and the land. As expressed, our community thrives because of those who contribute time, energy, money, and their presence to our community. There is a gift in coming together and sharing service and shared meaning, and we are grateful for your financial contributions that help support and develop our vital congregation. You can donate through e-transfer, Canada Helps, monthly contributions, and more. Please check out our donate button on the website for full details. I'm honored to have my daughter share space with me this morning as we invite you into song, We Shall Be Known. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle around to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle around to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. So this morning I've invited, we don't have a picture book to share with it, but I have invited Clara and Izzy to share a story with you called A Serious Case. It sounds like serious business. So I'm just gonna shift so that they can fit in here well. Yeah. All right. You still see this? Can you see it? Okay, perfect. So this is called A Serious Case of the Cants, written by very well-known author Melissa Horvath. The story is quite simple. This much I do know. The story is quite simple. Here's how it did go. It started one day when she was quite small. It started and continued for no reason at all. Caroline could, like all people do. Caroline could, like me and like you.
Could you ask, what could she do?
Anything, I say, and that would be true.
Could she run? Could she dance like she's ants in her pants? Could she soar like a glider or climb like a spider?
Of course she can. This much is true. She can do the things her heart has passion to.
Caroline could. This is the chant.
Caroline could, until she believed that she can't. It started one day when she was quite small, and she held that belief even after growing tall. She heard from people she can't. Yes, it's true. She may have heard that she can't from people like me and like you.
Coraline, you can't climb that high. Coraline, you simply were not meant to fly. Coraline, darling, you're much too smart to devote your life to dancing and art.
So dance she did not, and not one painting did she make.
And she always ate her dinner before eating her cake.
She grew, and the can't belief grew stronger, and the days grew darker and foggy and longer.
She worried, what if people laugh or make strange stares? What if I do something and nobody cares? What if I fall? What if I fail? What if I try it and I grow a tail? What if I get hurt? What if I cry?
What if I tell the truth and they believe it's a lie? What if I choose and no one comes along? What if I sing a wrong note in that song? What if I get teased by the kids that are cool? What if I am not the best in my school? What if I stand up for what is just and true?
What if I am alone when I do?
Act she did not. She lived very little, you see. She got lost in the what-ifs that can define you and me. I haven't heard, though legends be told. She said and did nothing and grew to be old. It's a sad story for me anyway. It's a sad story, and her choice you may say. For we do, I would agree, have our choices to be whatever we wish to dream of and see.
Rosalie, I've heard, was told she can't too. Was told she can't, like sometimes people do.
Rosalie, you can't jump that high. Rosalie, just do it and don't ask why. Rosalie, you don't fit in with our team. Rosalie, that is such a silly dream. Oh, Rosalie was told. She most certainly can't. Told till she felt as small as an ant. Told till one day she spoke out loud.
I can and I will. Of myself I'll be proud.
So she walked and fell a few times in a row. She sang the wrong notes and went on with the show. She laughed till she cried and cried till she laughed. She was curious and giggly and sometimes plain daft. And she didn't worry about win or lose. She biked again anyway, even after that bruise. She saw the world and kept her mind open and free, and oh, the things she would come to see. She didn't worry about being right. She wasn't interested in that kind of fight. She grew to understand things they do say that some adults don't know to this day. What about all the what ifs and can'ts? What about all of those silly rants? What about if she got laughed at or left out? What about all the crazy self-doubt? She did get laughed at for this thing or that, and on the sidelines of life, she almost sat. Sometimes when life was going anything but well, the idea of living fearlessly was a very hard sell.
Yet something was different inside her mind. She made space for her spirit, herself she did find. When life got tough, which it often will do, she didn't give up, even when friends were few. She made a choice to live life anyway, to write her own story and live out each day. She figured it's better, and I agree that it's true, to live life either way, may it be happy or blue. We find as we are challenged that we grow and learn more, even though sometimes we get hurt and are sore. We walk through the rain and learn how to dance. We walk with a smile, even in our wet pants. We walk through the rain and find the sun. We walk and we learn this living thing is fun.
We can all catch the cans, like a cold or a flu. Remember, it's your choice how you perceive when you do.
To troubled hearts, to spirits overbrimming, we offer our ministry. For those stories that need to be heard, we offer the care of our attention to the blooming of lives and to their dying. We open our hearts. This time we make simple or sacred by a simple act we all know. We minister by listening. I want to invite you now into a time of meditation or peaceful pause, as it were. I invite you to notice your body. Maybe take a moment and rub your hands together, and then offer that warmth to yourself. Maybe it's a hug, maybe it's holding and feeling the warmth of your hands against your skin, taking a moment to connect in that space. Breathing deeply into the gift that is you. Our theme this month is growth. As we explore the power of story and shared experience, we are invited to also go within, to explore our experiences and our understanding of them. This month, our theme is growth. And so as we flow into this, the invitation to notice the ways in which we may wish to grow. I'll offer a reading from John O'Donohue, followed by a moment of silence and a song from Sleeping at Last, one of my favorite bands, called Hope. It was just released recently, and I invite you into that space of reflection or peaceful pause. There is a beautiful complexity of growth within the human soul. In order to glimpse this, it is helpful to visualize the mind as a tower of windows. Sadly, many people remain trapped at the one window, looking out every day at the same scene in the same way. Real growth is experienced when you draw back from that one window, turn, and walk around the inner tower of the soul to see all the different windows that await your gaze. Through these different windows, you can see a new vista of possibility, presence, and creativity. Complacency, habits, and blindness often prevent you from feeling your life. So much depends on the frame of vision, the window through which you choose to look. This morning, it is my absolute honor to welcome back Anne Bachma, author of My Life Living Spiritually. And I was thinking about when I first met Anne, it was my summer working at Unicamp, and I had my campsite right beside hers. And what I noticed immediately was the generosity of heart that she shares her space with others, in the way that she shares her space with others, the connection she has to the earth, a wonderful sense of humor, and this heartbeat that I recognized in her because I see it in myself also. So Anne, welcome. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for being brave and sharing your story, being courageous, and bringing this heartbeat to us. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Melissa. That was the most beautiful introduction anyone's ever given me. And I'm starting the service in tears already because the music has been so moving, especially that last song. So I'm a little verklempt, but that's okay. It is such a pleasure to be with you all today, this morning for our service, and some of you have signed up for the writing workshop this afternoon, so we're going to be spending quite a bit of time together. And I recognize one person here who has taken my workshop series. Nice to see you, Lorna. Lorna wrote a beautiful story in my workshop series, so I'm just thrilled about that. So today I'm going to be talking to you about how I wrote a memoir, as you know, My Year of Living Spiritually. And it was quite the journey. I've been a writer my whole life. And today I'm going to be talking to you about how, why it's important to tell your story and how writing is a lot like life in some ways. So yeah, a couple of years ago, I stood before your congregation live and in person as I launched my book into the world. And afterwards I signed some copies and some of you bought them and we even hugged each other. Imagine that. We are living in a totally different world now, but we can't connect physically, but we can still connect on Zoom and we can still connect through our stories. So even though I make my living as a writer, you know, putting together this memoir was quite a daunting task. I spent 9 months in 2018 working on it. It helped that I had friends and family who were supportive. I had a good editor who I knew would not let me embarrass myself too much. But the person who really helped me the most was someone I didn't even know, and that was Anne Lamont. Writing guru of sorts, you may have heard of her. She's penned several memoirs and collections of essays, including the best book on writing that I've ever read, called Bird by Bird, Instructions on Writing and Life. It is full of reassuring advice, like how perfectionism can paralyze you and prevent you from ever writing a word if you let it, and how you just have to get the words down without being too hard on yourself. Write shitty first drafts, she urges. You can always revise later. Lamont is very sympathetic to the inadequate feelings that can arise when we try to write our story. She says, every single writer I know sits down and goes, oh, I'm doomed. The well has run dry. I'm beating a dead horse. It's awful. My tooth hurts. I think I need a root canal. And plus I have cancer in my legs. If she could feel that kind of insecurity, then maybe there was some hope for me. So there are a lot of similarities between writing a story and living a life. For example, writing like life can sometimes be hard. That's why writers have come up with all kinds of tricks to motivate themselves to get the words down. There's a funny story about Victor Hugo, author of Hunchback of Notre Dame, who would instruct his valet to confiscate all of his clothes and take them out of the house so that confined naked in his home with nowhere to go, he had nothing to do but write. For me, the trick was to sequester myself. I had to become a hermit, essentially, which was not easy because I'm a major extrovert. And I essentially locked myself away for many months and disconnected from the world in order to concentrate on what felt at times like an overwhelming task. You know, most things in life become easier the longer you do them, but not writing, at least not for me. It was easy maybe 5% of the time. Otherwise, it was mostly a struggle, an absorbing and sometimes happy one, but a struggle nonetheless. A lot of people, mostly those who have never done it, think that writing can't be all that hard. There's the old joke about the brain surgeon and the writer who meet at a party. The brain surgeon says to the writer, how interesting, I've always wanted to be a writer. And in fact, when I retire, I'm going to become a writer. And the writer replies, well, isn't that a coincidence? When I retire, I'm going to become a brain surgeon. I think Hemingway said it best. There is nothing to writing. All you do is sit at a typewriter and bleed. Another thing that helped me handle the daunting prospect of writing a book was understanding that you get through it much as you get through life. One day at a time, one sentence at a time, sometimes one word at a time. The novelist E.L. Doctorow had this to say about writing. You can only see as far as your headlights, but you can make the whole journey that way. You don't have to see where you're going. You don't have to know your final destination. You just have to see 2 or 3 feet ahead of you. You can just take it bit by bit. Or as the title of Lamont's instruction manual indicates, bird by bird. That title was inspired by a childhood incident involving her older brother. When he was in 4th grade, he had a term paper due on birds the next day. He hadn't started it and he was panicking. And his father sat down with him and said, "Just take it bird by bird, buddy. Just write about pelicans and then write about pelicans in your own voice, and then find out about chickadees and tell us about them in your own voice, and then geese." As she says, this is also a good approach for life. We may be panicking, we may be going through a hard time and projecting our fears into the future, but usually this doesn't help us much. It's best to take it day by day, bird by bird. I can tell you the process of writing a book is an exercise in self-doubt. And this is something many writers have. And perhaps some of you who are taking the workshop this afternoon are already worried about this and already struggling with self-doubt. You will ask yourself, does my story matter? Why should anyone care about it? What should I put in and what should I leave out? Who am I to think I can do this? Isn't it hubris to write about my ordinary little life when so many others have much more dramatic tales to tell? Sylvia Plath said, the worst enemy to creativity is self-doubt. But you have to find a way to put your head down and lay the self-doubt aside. One strategy is to think of self-doubt as a pesky person you don't much care for. Put them in another room when you're writing and just ignore them for a while. Trust me, they'll still be there when you lift your head. I also tried to heed the wise words of Globe and Mail columnist Elizabeth Ranzetti, whose collection of essays titled Shrewd begins with this brilliant first line about the self-criticism we can inflict on ourselves. The voice in your head, she writes, is an asshole. So my book focuses on a year I spent engaged in 24 spiritual practices, everything from meditation to experimenting with solitude and simplicity, going on a pilgrimage to Henry David Thoreau's iconic Walden Pond. I went to witch camp at Unicamp, the Women's March in Washington. I took magic mushrooms for the first time and got a tattoo, among other spiritual adventures. And the very act of writing itself, I believe, can be a spiritual practice that can offer both healing and transformation and growth, as Mel referred to earlier. That's because writing teaches us to really pay attention to our lives, to reflect on them, to try to make sense of what happened and look for the meaning in it. The author Zadie Smith says, the very reason I write is so that I might not sleepwalk through my entire life. Often the personal stories that we carry in our heads and hearts are rooted in some kind of pain. And writing about them can help dissolve the hard knots of loss, betrayal, regret, and guilt that can keep us stuck in the past. Every life is full of difficult experiences, yours and mine. It's entirely unfair that some people have much greater challenges than others. Most things you will get over in time, or you learn to live with them, or they become life lessons, or maybe even a story. Writing about the painful stuff can be a way to release it. That's because offloading your worries on the page frees up the mental resources that can help you cope with the challenges that life presents and fortify your spirit. Isaac Dinesen, the author of Out of Africa, said, I think all sorrows can be born if you put them into a story or tell a story about them. Human beings, we have a deep desire to tell our stories, and this urge stays with us right up until the moment of our death. I have a friend who works in palliative care who has heard a number of deathbed confessions, stories that people finally released before they died. One man admitted to her to killing someone in a war. Another shared that he'd known his whole life he was gay, but it would have hurt too many people to live the way he always wanted to. And then there was the married woman who told her that she hoped when she got to heaven, she'd meet her lover again and not her deceased husband. Telling your story doesn't just help you, it helps others. There's a good chance that someone who hears your story has gone through the exact same struggles as you. They want to know, what did you learn? One of my motivations for writing my memoir was to share the difficult experience of leaving the fundamentalist Dutch Reformed church that I grew up in and the resulting decade-long estrangement with my family of origin due to our religious differences. It's been gratifying to hear from a number of readers, people I don't know, who've written to me to tell me about how they too endured a similar struggle and found some bit of comfort in reading about my experience. Some people doubt that they have what it takes to tell a story. Flannery O'Connor said, anyone who survives a Southern childhood has enough material to last a lifetime. And I would amend that to anyone who survives their childhood has enough material to last a lifetime. There's something especially potent in our childhood memories, poignant too, I would say. Our early experiences are what shape us into the adults that we become. Graham Greene said, childhood is the bank balance of the writer. People worry that they don't have anything interesting to write about, but every life is filled with its own particular dramas, tragedies, and comedies. And you are the only one who's equipped to write about these things, since you are the authority of your own life. Write for yourself, even if you have no interest in getting published or telling your story out loud. Writing is its own reward. When you tell your story, not everyone is going to like it. Just as in life, not everyone is always going to like you. While I was thankful to receive a great deal of positive press for my memoir, I did get one bad review on Amazon from one disgruntled reader, which I admit stung. She said, and I quote, "I do not recommend this book. Sorry, I bought it. The writer had a lot of problems, such as coming from a dysfunctional family. I was expecting a more upbeat person, not a person who had so many negatives in her life." Ouch. Doesn't feel good when people don't like us, but all too often we focus on the one dissenting voice, the one person who doesn't smile back at us, the one who keeps their arms crossed in the audience instead of applauding our efforts, the one who isn't inclined to encourage us, the one who writes us a really crappy review on Amazon. When we do focus on the single negative voice instead of the more positive ones, well, why do we do this? Perhaps their criticism mirrors our own sometimes harsh self-judgment and insecurity. Which brings me to my next point. You don't have to be a perfect protagonist in your story or in your life. You don't have to pretend you have everything figured out. In fact, we don't usually care much for people who think they do. It's far better to have flaws, and luckily for most of us, that isn't a problem at all. People will have a much easier time relating to what you have to say if you can be vulnerable and authentic. I wrote about some of my own personal challenges in my memoir: the long estrangement from my family, drinking too much wine at times, about the father who deserted our family when I was 3, my separation after more than 30 years of marriage, my insecurities as a mother, and the fact that I did not visit my stepfather on his deathbed. None of this was easy to write about, but it is the tough, true stuff of life. Stories are compelling if you can show your messy, conflicted, and complicated self. It's such a gift for someone to tell you the truth, says Lamont. And it is such a gift for someone to create art with the mess and the chaos and the despair of life, to have turned it into a song, a poem, a novel, a story. It's the hugest gift we have to offer one another. Sometimes in writing, as in life, you have to hit delete. I had a great editor in my book who shaved off 10,000 words of material that was weighing my story down. Sometimes things have to be cut out that aren't working, whether it's excess words or the person who was cruel to you. And sometimes the thing that holds us back in writing, as in life, is worrying about too much about what other people think. A lot of storytelling is confessional and reveals hard truths. Sometimes these truths have to do with things other people did to us that were unkind. We worry about making them look bad if we tell the truth. I think the question to ask yourself in this situation is whether you are telling your story out of anger or revenge, or whether you're telling it to try to understand what happened and to create understanding in others. Cheryl Strayed, the author of the best-selling memoir Wild, suggests that we be ruthless with ourselves and gentle with others when we're writing about them. Nobody wants to hear a story that simply blames other people for our misery, she says. It's usually best to err on the side of generosity. On the other hand, if people were cruel to you, it's okay to say so, because no one owns your story but you. When I was writing my book, excuse me. When I was writing my book, I worried about what my mother would think. I wrote about how close we'd been when I was young, and later when I left the church, how our relationship became strained to the point that she told me I was going to hell and my children were headed there too. This is what her church had taught her about people like me who leave. There were fights and tears, and it seemed impossible to figure out a way to ever be close again. And in fact, during the writing, when I was writing the book, we had not spoken in 10 years. And that stemmed from, I've been a Unitarian for about 15 years, and I had gone to the United Church before, and I didn't tell my parents that I had become a Unitarian because I was very fearful of their disapproval. And it was my then 8-year-old daughter, Ruby, who blurted out the news one day by saying something like, oh, we're Unitarian now, and we never talk about Jesus. So you can imagine how that went over. But as I wrote about my mother in my book, and I took a deep dive into the past, I tried to understand her early life, how she never finished grade school and had to go out to work at a young age, how she herself was indoctrinated in the faith, and how she got married at 17 on her 17th birthday to a man who left her 4 years later with 2 kids and had to go on welfare for a time. My life was so much different than hers because I had opportunities that she never had. I tried to be compassionate in the way that I wrote about her, while also documenting some of the pain in our relationship. I gave the manuscript to my mother before it was published, and she suggested she'd get around to reading it at some point. Then she called me the very next morning after staying up all night to read it. She has never really said what she thinks about my book, whether she likes it or doesn't like it. But she did tell me she loved me, and it was the first time I'd heard those words in about 20 years. Recently, she asked me for a copy of my book to give to a friend of hers, and I took that as a form of endorsement. And eventually she said to me, sometimes people have to agree to disagree. That simple acknowledgement has changed everything, and our relationship has been restored. I don't really believe in miracles, but that sure feels like one to me. Finally, I want to say that I think stories are the key to an everlasting life, which is helpful for those of us who don't believe in heaven. Your legacy is not in the photo albums that you keep stored in the basement. Photos don't tell the whole story, and in fact can sometimes be entirely false. We've all smiled in a photo when we've felt nothing but despair inside. Only stories can get to the truth of our existence. Write them down for your children, for yourself, for your friends, for the world. As Anne Lamott says, you're going to feel like hell if you wake up someday and you never wrote the stuff that is tugging on the sleeves of your heart, your stories, your memories, your visions and songs, your truth, your version of things in your own voice. That's all you really have to offer us, and that's why you were born. You don't have to be a writer or a performer to tell your story. If there's anything I've learned through the 8 years of hosting, more than 200 storytellers who have shared their true life tales in the 6-minute memoir storytelling event that I host, is that anyone can do this if they have a good story and they're willing to spend a bit of time crafting it. We are living in a divided time, but stories have the unique ability to bind us together and remind us what we have in common. Loving our neighbor starts with understanding our neighbor, and storytelling allows us to do this. Jeanette Walls, author of the great memoir, The Glass Castle, says one of the lessons she learned from writing her memoir is how much we all have in common. She says, so many of us think that certain things only happen to us. I'm constantly urging people, especially older folks, to write about their lives. Memoir is about handing over your life to someone and saying, this is what I went through. This is who I am, and maybe you can learn something from it. Stories tell people who we are and help us remember who we used to be. Your stories are your legacy. They keep you alive long after you die. You're never going to kill storytelling, says our own Margaret Atwood. It's built into the human plan. Thank you.
Oh, Anne, wow. I started to write, as I often do, sort of like gems. And then I recognized that I can't actually just type every word you're saying, and I stopped. But before I did, I really heard and typed down that idea of writing shitty first drafts. In our Heart Space group, one of the things that I share is one of my art teachers that says all the benefits of creativity and art are received independent of the outcome. Basically, shitty art will give you the same benefits as your most masterpiece type creation. And for some reason, that was really freeing for me. And that other piece that you said about the reason I write is so that I don't sleepwalk through my life. For me, as I said before, throughout your talk, I can just hear your heart. I can hear and want to acknowledge the courage it takes to step out. And I appreciate your sharing on the rub that we receive when we show up as ourselves. People will throw tomatoes at us. And ideally getting to that point where we care more about being who we are and showing up as our authentic self than we do about that rub. And I guess maybe in some ways then that rub we might receive tells us we're on the right track. But it's a kind of cool thing. So thank you so much for being here and for sharing with us today. Before we close, Izzy and I would like to share a closing song. There is so much magnificence near the ocean. Waves keep rolling in. Waves keep rolling in. There is so much magnificence near the ocean. Waves keep rolling in. Waves keep rolling in. There is so much magnificence near the ocean. Waves keep rolling in. Waves keep rolling in. If you just keep going in the labyrinth, you will never get lost. You will only turn corners if you just keep moving. The labyrinth doesn't end. It is only about having the courage to turn the next corner. And to close, a quote by Kirk Webb. Let us tell our story. You tell your story, and I'll tell mine. And within our creativity, we will find our imagined connection, our artistically woven oneness, not in our belief system, but in our story. We get rid of any dogma. We move beyond our beliefs and into our experiences. Paradox, tension, complexity, layered understanding of life. All that is what holds us together. As we extinguish this chalice, we do so deeply connected.